morning.
Morning.
I don't know if the applause was for the video or for myself. Um, I'll go with what makes me feel better about myself. It was for me. Thank you everybody for the warm welcome and for joining us this morning. My name is Ndumiso Zulu, and everything you associate with my last name when it comes to me is actually true. So let's get that out of the way. So as they mentioned, I'm part of the Masisizane team. I've been here since 2022, March. Very interesting time. In fact, I have a story about my first month here. So I joined the fund on the 15th of March, and 2 weeks later, the CEO who hired me resigned. I like to think the two things are not connected, but you never know. And about a month after that, when his acting period was done, we got a phone call. There are 4 very angry gentlemen at reception, and they're saying they are not leaving until they see the CEO. 2 problems. We don't have a CEO. Second, this is the back end of COVID. People were coming to the office once a week, and that just so happened to be our non-office day. So one of my colleagues was no longer here, had to get onto the phone and explain to them, and they basically agreed on condition that we come and see them the following day. So we go into the office. These gentlemen are here waiting for us. It's 3 of us. It's myself, it's my colleague Tabo over here, and then another colleague, Portia, who was not there. First thing that struck me was, these guys look very angry. And they are very big. So I look around the room, I'm like, oh, if this goes pear-shaped, I don't like our chances here. So I sat right by the door and kept it slightly open, just in case. So it turns out the reason they were upset is because we had approved funding for them. And then at a later stage, when we were supposed to be dispersing or they were supposed to be receiving the money, we then pulled the funding, and they didn't understand why. And the reason we pulled the funding is because when we did the final background checks, FICA, compliance, things like that, it transpired that they were actually listed from a debt point of view because of another business that went south, so they were now listed in their personal capacities as well as in the business's name. And the amount they were listed for just so happened to be more or less equal to the money we were supposed to give to them. So we said, gentlemen, we have a problem here. And their argument was, you are lending this to this company. The issue you are talking about is to a different deal. Why are you mixing up the two? So we explained to them that the two are actually a lot more closely linked than it may first appear. And that's really because at the end of the day, the business of lending, the business of funding is based on faith at its core. It's trust. I say the business of lending is for crazy people, and then bankers look at me funny, but I'll tell you why I say that. A stranger walks up to you with a piece of paper, says, I need you to give me 5 million rand or 10 million rand. I will pay you back in 5 years' time. If somebody walked up to you right now and said that, you'd laugh them out the room. It doesn't make sense. And yet you have an entire multi-trillion-dollar industry that is predicated on that premise. We give money on day one in return for a promise that somebody else that you don't know from a bar of soap is going to pay you back in 5 years' time. How on earth do you get the comfort that that is going to happen? Ladies and gentlemen, that is the crux of why access to funding remains a challenge. It remains topical. I can tell you, SMEs struggle to get finance. Funders struggle to give finance to SMEs. It's not for a lack of funding resources, but something is not clicking in the middle. something is just not connecting. You get people with the resources saying, we have dedicated so much resources for SMEs. You have SMEs saying, who on earth is getting these resources because it's not me? And I'm hoping that the discussions today are going to shed some light, some practical solutions on how we can actually begin to tackle that problem. So back to my example, it turned out I didn't really need to use the exit I created myself. We finally found each other, and the gentleman walked away, wanting to come back after they'd resolved their issue. It's been 2.5 years and counting. And really the issue is, and I always say this to business owners, your personal life, you might not immediately realize it, has a direct impact on your business. And the sad thing is you don't realize that when you're still making some of your personal decisions. It's only down the line when you're trying to raise finance, when these things come back to bite you. And unfortunately, at that point, it's probably too late to go back and fix it, because business, by its very nature, is time sensitive. So if you are dead listed, you probably don't even know about it. When you find out the process to go back and fix that, let's say you were looking for funding to acquire a business. The seller of that business is not going to wait for you to sort out your life. They're just going to move on to somebody else, and when they do, you lose the opportunity. But this is where it gets interesting for me. When that happens, then I hear people say, yeah, all these funders are the same. It's the red tape. You have to go from pillar to post. I got some bad news for you. The financial sector is deeply rooted in regulation, and that is a necessity. It's a necessary evil. Think of it this way. You have money in a bank right now. Or I hope you have some money in the bank, otherwise we have a problem. The bank takes that money, lends it to someone else. But you are comfortable that if you went to the bank today, you'd be able to get your money, that if you swipe at hopefully not Gucci, the payment will go through and you will not have problems. That faith cannot happen, it cannot exist without the trust in the financial system. And regulation is what drives that trust. So I got bad news for you, because FICA is not going anywhere. Anti-money laundering provisions are not going anywhere. So the discussion we should be having is, how do we make sure we comply in a way that is quick, in a way that is efficient, in a way that is not disruptive to business. It's not going anywhere. We need to find a way to better manage it. And the starting point as a business owner is to sort out your own financial affairs first. One of the recent developments in finance, it's this anti-money laundering provisions that say, back in the day, if you were funding a business out of the company, we just needed to know who the shareholders and the directors are. That's it. But these days, you'll find that somebody has a trust that owns a company, and that company is who is trying to raise finance. Even though our relationship, the lending relationship or the funding relationship, is with a third company, the law requires us to go all the way back to who the ultimate beneficiary is. Because if we don't do that, we will find ourselves in trouble with the law. Some of you may have heard about where SASFIN finds itself today. Some of you would have heard about the developments at Itala Bank in KZN recently. That's what happens when that is not done. Now, I know entrepreneurs get very uncomfortable about disclosing information pertaining to family trusts. It could very well be that it's a blind trust and you have your children there. Maybe one of the children you don't want your wife to find out about. I'm a Zulu man, so nobody understands like me. But the problem is the law says we must find out, so we must. What you then need to do for yourself before you start the funding conversation, get your financial affairs in order first. Because in our experience, that's the biggest stumbling block. Funding is not the only issue to SMEs. I'm sure in the discussions today we're going to talk about the actual existence in the market that you want to go into. One of my favorite stories, one of the speakers we had here says, Somebody comes to him and says, Chief, the franchise industry in South Africa is 20 billion. If I can just get 1% of that, I'll pay your money back 10 times over, which is true. However, if it was that easy to get that 1%, every man and his dog would be going for that 1%, right? And that's one of the biggest challenges. And it touches on another issue that we call funding readiness. Not everybody who needs funding is actually ready to receive funding, which is a difficult conversation to have because somebody's going to tell you, I know my business, I know I need money. What do you mean I'm not ready for money? There are things that need to happen for you to get to a point where you are fundable. And I think maybe as an industry, historically, we've probably erred in assuming that that aspect is already in existence. So maybe before we start talking about how much you need, we need to start talking about, are you ready to get those funds? And the risk, particularly in the development funding space, is that we tend to want to throw money at the problem. I have my targets. I need to disperse X amount of rands to SMEs in a financial year. My bonus depends on it. So what often happens is, I'm going to give you money even though deep down I know you're not ready. Earlier on in my career, I had a CEO at every credit meeting always finished off with the question, if this were your own money, out of your own pocket, would you fund this business? Obviously, I'm going to say yes because I want him to approve it, but deep down you knew. And funding readiness for me is that aspect we need to unlock. There is a lot of issues that plague SMEs, and I know we're going to discuss some of those today, anchoring around access to finance. I just want to drive home the point that says access to finance is a subset of a bigger issue that we need to solve for SMEs. Now, if you're an SME that is black, that is female, that is young, that is living with a disability, that is located in the rural areas, in the townships, all these problems are that much more acute for you. And this is why we set up this fund to specifically target that segment of the market. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the seminar today. Very excited to have you, and I hope it'll be as useful for you as I know it will be for me. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. And Ndumiso, that was absolutely fantastic. I think it's a great way to start our conversation today. And perhaps maybe, as somebody that's leading a fund, here's a question for you. Invest in an average business with a great management or a great business with average management. So, are we investing in, did I say that incorrectly? It's very possible. Invest in an average business with great management or a great business with average management. What can you fix?
That's a tricky one. So usually I would delegate this question to Thabo, but I can't do that today. So for me, ultimately, businesses are driven by people. It doesn't matter what the business does. The people are the engine. If the business is average, the people made it average, the people can make it above average. But if the people themselves are average, it doesn't matter how great the business is, that business will not continue being great.
Is there no opportunity to teach? When we talk about average for you, what would essentially be the characteristic of an average person? And what can we teach? Because people often say entrepreneurship can't be taught. What are your sentiments around that?
So I think entrepreneurship for me, like leadership, it's a little bit of both. Some things are innate, but some things can be taught. But teaching depends largely on attitude. So you gotta look and say, what makes this person average? Is it something within their control? Is it an element of laziness? Is it an element of saying, good enough is good enough for me? If that's the problem, you cannot teach that person. However, if it's a lack of skill or a lack of exposure, that's a different conversation. And we recognize that as a business, and part of our offering is one part finance, which I always call the easy part. The other part is business support. That support to get you from average or just good enough to being great. Unfortunately, it also needs to be funded. Everything of value costs money.
Yeah.
That's why we built that in as part of a blended finance solution.
Fantastic. I'm going to quickly put one of the SMEs on this table on the spot. Let's try Sihle's Brew. Sihle's Brew. What has been the stumbling block? We've got the CEO here. We've got a whole team of fantastic speakers. We've got a whole room to support you today. What has been your stumbling block? Please, can you stand up for me, sir?
Good morning. My name is Sihle Makubane. I'm a founder of Sihle's Brew. I think the stumbling block that has been in our way, it's mainly the main funding. I think it's the major thing was the COVID-19, which everyone never prepared about. And then when that happens, so everything changed. Technology and everything changed. And unfortunately, where we used to make money, and we then went from that from 5 coffee shops to 0 coffee shops. So then how then do you mitigate as a bank to able to help us to facilitate that transition? And then how then do you take out the red tape of being blacklisted and then continue with your journey?
So we know investors look to the future. So he's sitting with past performance, but the future looks shaky.
Yeah, they did not prepare me for all this.
My apologies.
If I had known, I was not going to agree to be the first speaker. No, that's a great question. I think COVID-19, and it's not an isolated challenge. COVID-19 wreaked havoc across businesses, top to bottom. When COVID hit, I was still in corporate and investment banking, and one of my clients were clients in the hospitality sector. Those were the people who were hardest hit. And the first thing they did, they called all the banks into a room and said, guys, we went from making millions a day to making 0. That means we can't pay you anymore. We don't know how long the lockdown is going to last, but until the country reopens, we can't pay you. The challenge for us is we owe you, we owe pretty much everybody, and we have covenants that if we break, all hell breaks loose. So please give us a dispensation that we should not pay you until we can, and you don't breach us. What I find, and this links up to something else that we do across the wider Old Mutual spectrum, which is financial education, I find SMEs are reluctant to go to a bank and say, I have a problem, help me. The minute I give you funding, we are married. I know that scares some people in the room, but that's the relationship. So when you have a problem at home, the first person you need to speak to is your spouse, because your problem is now my problem. So what I find, most people went into trouble during COVID, kept it to themselves, probably tried to solve it, it didn't get solved. 2-3 years down the line, they are now listed, banks are saying, I don't know you from above. So for me to have faith that you can repay me, I need to see how you conducted yourself in the past. But COVID happened to you in the past. So now not only was the past painful, the future also looks painful because of the past. So my advice would be, going forward, talk to your funder before you talk to everyone else, because we have gotten applications from clients that are blacklisted. If you are blacklisted because of COVID, if you are blacklisted because you lost your job, my first question would be, what did you do? If you went to a lender and said, I have a problem, and came to some arrangement, that's something. But if you're saying, I'm sitting with a problem, I'm kind of hoping you give me this money, then I can settle them, that's a non-starter. Hopefully that answers the question. It's a very long answer.
Yes. A round of applause is Ndumiso Zulu. Thank you very much, sir.